Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Heather, and on this channel we like to walk a very fine line between a shopping addicted makeup monster and a responsible adult with a makeup hobby. Now, I really enjoy eyeshadow singles, duochromes, blush, highlight, lip gloss, basically everything except pressed glitter, and today I'm going to be showing you a couple of palettes in my collection. Okay, a lot more than a couple, let's be real, that just remind me of spring. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stick with me. We're getting into it right now. Now, if you like this look, it's with the Rogue palette from Fantasy Cosmetica, and the demo for that should be coming up very, very soon. So where do I even start? I kind of divided things up a little bit into like neutrals, pinky tones, pastels, and then some kind of like brighter tones that still just gave me those springtime vibes. Lots of greens and pinks and soft blues. So let's start with the neutrals because there's only two of them. The first is this Too Faced Natural Lust palette. Natural Lust palette. And it looks like this. And the reason why I picked this one out is because it's very soft. It's got this like floral pattern on it, right? So very springy there. And the colors, they're just beautiful. You can make these really nice, like kind of cool toned or pinky toned soft eye looks. You've got lots of shimmers to pick from. And then you've got these couple of shades down here in the bottom corner that can serve as kind of a pop if you want to make it a little bit more dramatic. But it does just give me like springtime vibes. Like this packaging is spring packaging. Next up is the Odin's Eye and Judy palette. Now this one is no longer available, but if you have it in your collection, it might be a great one to pull out. Color story looks like this, and it's these kind of like muted, kind of warm toned neutrals, plus you've got this really muted chartreuse, almost like split pea soup kind of green shade. I think those work really nicely together. Got a beautiful multi-chrome in here. I mean, all in all, I think this would make great looks for the spring, and so I wanted to include it here as my other neutral palette. Let's talk pink tones next, and I had to pick out this palette too. This is the Nabla Soul Blooming, because I have a couple of palettes in here that are no longer available. I did kind of go over 20. I think I have like 23 or 24 at this point, because then you have some that you may already have in your collection, and if not, you have some that are still readily available. This one, of course, I had to pick it. It has these really, really beautiful soft shades. You've got kind of this like lighter, brighter tone. You've got florals on the packaging, which of course just rings true. This kind of peachy coral shade I think is just beautiful and perfectly fits this theme. And then you have this shade here, Honey Drip, which looks like a white, but it's actually like an iridescent, almost goldenrod leaning orange kind of shade. Very, very pretty. I think this palette works really well together for springtime looks. Another palette I had to consider is the Sweet Talk palette. Now, I edited mine a little bit because I was sick of opening this and seeing pressed glitters in here. So I did take out, I believe it was these two shades were pressed glitters, and I put something in their place. But now you just have this really pretty corally kind of color story, and you have this beautiful, beautiful Super Shock shade, which is right there. Just dumb pretty. Oh yeah, so that one definitely had to make it. Plus you got like the floral vibes. It's kind of this like lighter, brighter leaning pastel kind of thing. Definitely influenced my decisions a lot when I was looking at palettes. The other palette I picked out, which this palette I got from my Tribe Beauty Box subscription. This is the Rose Period palette from Suva Beauty, and it looks like this. And I just think these like soft kind of mauvey pinky purple tones are a beautiful representation of springtime colors, right? You do still have a little bit of depth here, but there's still like nice bright shimmers that can kind of lighten the look back up a little bit. This, of course, is not the only mauvey pinky purpley palette I have in my collection. I probably have 200 of those just by themselves. But this is a good representation that I wanted to pick out, and I didn't just want to fill this entire video with ColourPop, right? So I wanted to pick out from different brands, so this one came to mind. So next, I'll do all the kind of like pastel-y things, and then we'll lean into color a little bit more. This one also I don't think is available anymore. This is the Essence Never Give Up on Your Daydream palette, and I actually had to get this replacement from my aunt, so thank you so much, Tia, if you watch this, because my daughter's like into the first one, and they trashed it. But this was a really, really beautiful palette. It works great for like a soft duochrome type iridescent highlighter, or as inner corners, brow bone highlights, a really soft topper on the lid. They are just beautiful shades. They have a really soft kind of buttery texture, And overall, I have just really enjoyed using this palette. So you can see, like, you get a little bit of color, but not a ton, right? So you could use them as highlights or inner corners. But they just, so pretty. That orange, this one right here, well, right there, sends me. I love that shade. It's my favorite in the whole palette. Along that same vein, I did pull this back out of my last declutter. I know I didn't need it, but I wanted it, and it still smells like vanilla, so I couldn't help myself. But kind of these like softer tones here are so beautiful for springtime. They have a really nice luminosity. And then I think, is it Fairy or Mystic? Either of these two shades I have not found a lot of duplicates for, so since I already had it, I was like, you know what, let me just hang on to it. The only downside with this palette, because it definitely is more of a topper palette, the only downside is that there's only one matte, and it's this shade right here. Everything else in here is a metallic, including the highlighter in the middle. But still smells like vanilla. That tart vanilla smell, I love it. They should make a perfume. Tarte, make a perfume. Next up, this one is a little bit off the rails here, but the Lethal is Dead and Teresa palette, the original one. This one definitely has like some nice pastels, right? Like you have this beautiful pastel kind of yellowy shimmer shade. You've got these kind of softer shades here. This chartreuse is really light. A lot of these shades are just really soft, beautiful washes of color. And because of that, I felt like it was important to include this in my video, because you may have it in your collection. And then of course you'd be able to pull it out for spring, because just looking at the packaging, you would think like, oh, fall, Halloween, winter type palette. But when you actually open it up, you're like, is it though? Is it? Next up is the Violet Voss Sugar Crystals palette. Now I could not talk spring palettes without including this one. This one I could make the case for spring or summer, but I went ahead and put it in the spring palettes. I love the like nice vibrant pops of color across the top, but these shades in the center have really nice depth to them because they have like a nice base color, and then these are just a nice iridescent wash of color as well. Very beautiful on the lids, inner corners, face highlights. This is a very multi-purpose palette. And then of course, because you have this beautiful like pastel packaging, fits the theme perfectly. The next one up to talk about is the Garden of Juvia's palette. And this is of course from Juvia's Place, and it looks like this. Lots of soft kind of colors. Of course, these pastels are all going to be kind of soft colors. But what I like about this palette is that it has some really nice duochromes in it too. Like this one pools green. You've got this one that has more of like a burgundy base that pools hot pink. You've got this one, which again pools kind of a greeny yellow type shade, but it has an underlying orange type base to it. This one is a green that actually pools pink. So you've got a lot of really cool duochrome type shades in here to work from. The mattes, I feel like these two mattes, I didn't really need these two mattes. Like they could have given me other shades, I would have been much happier. Like maybe a really like deeper pink shade. I'm not sure, it's hard to say, but I didn't need the neutrals. Everything else in here though, I really like. Next up is the Glamlight Ice Cream Dream palette. My aunt always calls it the ice cream truck palette, so then I keep forgetting what it's actually called. But yeah, Ice Cream Dream. Of course, you've got these really beautiful matte shades here, and then you've got this nice collection of kind of pastel-y shades here that are really nice shimmer metallic type shades. Of course, you've got some darker stuff up here, which I don't really mess around with too much because the neutrals kind of bore me, but all this right here is like cotton candy jelly bean dream. One palette I have not gotten a lot of use out of, but I do want to try again to see if I can make it work a little bit better, was the Unicorn Cosmetics Angel palette. When they first sneak peeked this, I was so hyped for this palette. The minute it launched on Beauty Bay, I bought it. And I do like the palette. I think it has some pretty kind of like soft pastels, and then you've got these really beautiful greens, this nice peach here. They're metallic shades though, hard pan kind of quickly. I don't know if you can see this. Let's see. You can see how it kind of like hard panned on me. So I need to figure out if there's a way maybe I can dig with a brush a little bit and kind of clean that off and try again, because I do think it's a really beautiful color story. And I love the packaging. I mean, the whole thing is a vibe, right? So I just want to try to make this one work a little bit better, but it definitely does give me those springtime vibes. I'm making a very unsteady pile of palettes on the floor. I feel like this is going to blow up in my face, and yet I'm still doing it. A newer palette to my collection is the Beauty Bay Retro Love palette. This one I don't think I've actually got a video up on yet, but I do think it's pretty and definitely springtime appropriate. These kind of soft, kind of Eastery pastels are very pretty. You've got these two soft pastels here. These metallics are stupid pretty. Every time I go into this palette, I end up using this like 6 pan over here because I can't help myself. They're just so pretty. The only things that I feel like are not super Eastery or Eastery springtime would be like kind of this quad down here, this like neutral quad I didn't really need, but everything else in here definitely works. Let's talk some kind of greeny, pinky, bluey palettes, and then we'll head into pure color. I picked out this one from Unique Beauty, which is the Bubble Time palette, and it looks like this. It's just this cute little 6-pan, but I think the shades in here are really nice. I love the duochrome, like this duochrome is so pretty, and I think it works really well with these mattes in here because they're kind of this like soft olivey mint hybrid that I think works well for spring. Of course, they're really light in tone, and these shades, because they are like a thinner matte formula, I think you can wash them out a lot easier. So definitely wanted to make sure I shouted this palette out. Unique Beauty has like really cool palettes. Honestly, you should check their site out if you haven't already. Then I had to pick out some Natasha Denona, right? So I picked out two, the Mini Retro and then the Midi Retro Glam. Mini Retro, of course, has these very beautiful kind of muted khaki and kind of pinky beige type shades, and then this really beautiful topper shade here. Really like this one. And then the expansion of this palette looks like this, which is super cool with this like image that it has on it. You can kind of catch that third stripe. It's hard to catch. Anyway, I've used this a couple of times, and I think I still like the little one better, but I do think this is a pretty alternative. I feel like it's missing something, but I can't put my finger on what it is. I do love this shade here. It's a really nice like frosty mint shade, and this shade Flutter is like one of those super sparkly topper shades that she's known for. There's a lot of matte to or cream to powder formulas in here for the mattes, which I don't personally mind, but some people do, so just know that if you're thinking of picking this one up. But all in all, yeah, of course, springtime, had to mention these two. Next up is the Cara Beauty. This is the Limitless Beauty, I think is what they call this one. Yeah, Limitless Beauty palette looks like this. It's one of those magazine type palettes, and there's the inside color story. I love this color story. You've got these beautiful like green yellow shades here. This is like super beautiful yellow with almost no base to it, and then you've got kind of a topper version of it as well. The greens are really nice and punchy, very like Eastery spring kind of colors, and then you've got a handful of pinks to really, you know, add that pop of color. Neutrals, obviously I could care less about these neutrals, but the rest of the palette I think works really well in that sort of springtime vibe. And I found this at TJ Maxx for $7.99. I found actually all three of the palettes for $7.99, and I was super impressed with all of them. All right, next up, this one is from Poland, Glam Shop's Laguna palette, and I debated about putting this one in spring or summer, and I definitely think you could make the case for both. But when I opened it up, I was just so excited about it that I was like, I need to put this in the video now. These are beautiful shades. They have some really beautiful reflections to them. This kind of soft minty shade, I mean, it's definitely starting to crack a little bit, which I don't love for me, but it is a super beautiful color. This shade has a lot of like lime green sparkles in it, which I really like. This shade actually fell out when I first got the palette. Probably why it was on clearance, but it does still perform really nicely. And then these two shades are like dumb pretty. So I really like this particular palette. If it is still available, it would be one that I would check out, even though mine came a little bit demolished. I mean, it did come all the way from Poland. And then last up, we have a couple more things to talk about. I have some mainstream and some indie here. For mainstream side of things, Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde. Like, this is the pastel palette, right? I mean, she had those pastel neon palettes, like the little 9-pans, but they were both those collections were dreadful. So we're just gonna pretend like they didn't exist. This palette though, super pretty. You have some beautiful like mauve neutral kind of matte shades to go with it, but then these pops of these shimmery shades here are so pretty. All of the metallics in this palette are beautiful shades. So this would be a great one to check out if you're looking for something a little more high-end. Maybe you have a Sephora gift card you want to use. They are actually having a sale right now too. I think it's 25% off of all the makeup, so that would be a good time to consider picking it up as well. All right, and everything else, we have 4 more, and they're all indie. This one I think just restocked recently, so it's a great time to think about picking it up if you have not already. But Odensai Solomon 2 looks like this, and of course this gives me like springy summer vibes. You have these beautiful kind of pastel shades here. You have some really nice light bright metallics, and then I like that you have some depth here to kind of balance that and give it a little bit more variety in the eye look. Obviously these here, even though they kind of lean more towards neutrals, are not neutrals in and of themselves, which makes me like this palette so much more. But yeah, this is a great little 15 pan palette. Would highly recommend for spring and summer. Please don't drop. Please don't fall. Please don't break. The end. All right, this one I think is also a retired palette, but I did want to mention it in case you have it in your collection. And this is the Drench Cosmetics and Neon MUA Lunar Retrograde palette. Like, look at this packaging. Ugh, so pretty. But this is what the palette looks like when you open it up. And obviously you have kind of these like bluey aqua shades here. This is almost leaning towards mint. You have this really nice soft purple and this kind of really beautiful pink. You've got some nice duochromes that kind of balance that out. Again, I didn't need this row or half row of neutrals, but everything else in here gives me a lot of spring vibes. So I wanted to mention it because it may be one of those palettes that's kind of floated to the back of your drawer, and maybe you want to bring it back out and play with it around this time. And then no video of mine talking about palettes would be complete without talking about Nomad. So I had to bring out 2 of their palettes, the newer of which is the Paradise Islands palette, which looks like this. Obviously lots of springy pastels. You've got these beautiful poppy duochrome shades. This could not be any more spring if you tried. I mean, it definitely could also lean into summer. However, they have the Monteverde Cloud Forest palette now, which has neon pops amongst green shades, and I feel like that one works even better for summer, so I put this one for spring. And then last, certainly not least, and definitely the impetus for this video, is the Tokyo Harajuku palette. This palette is so pretty, so pastel. These duochromes down here are gorgeous. I honestly, they are just like some of my favorite shades in here, obviously, and they just have such beautiful color payoff. They've got lots of shine on them. Where can I put these? They're just so shiny and beautiful. I love them so much. So this one definitely had to stay in the list for that reason. And with that said, that is everything for this video. Let me know in a comment down below, what are some palettes that you definitely feel like are like your solid spring go-to palettes? I would love to know. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you go, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.